Imagine a place where the boundaries of age, industry, background, and culture melt away, replaced by a shared desire to explore the depths of our collective experiences. Here, on the open, shaded porch, amidst an atmosphere of serenity and tranquility, leaders from all walks of life gather to share their stories, the stories that shape their very beings and doings. This is the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Maroof.
My guest today is a visionary leader, a renowned scholar, and a passionate educator. Dr. Sanjay Sarma is the CEO, President, and Dean of the Asia School of Business, and a professor of mechanical engineering in the Sloan School of Management at MIT. Sanjay, welcome to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch.
Laila, first of all, such a pleasure to talk to you. I know we've been friends for some time, although in these strange times, mostly over Zoom, but such a pleasure to do this.
And even though we've been friends for years, I didn't realize how hard it would be to prepare for this podcast until I started researching. You have all these amazing accomplishments, distinguished awards, the many prominent positions, and you've even authored and co-authored 3 amazing books. I started mapping all these milestones down and connecting the dots. I was blown away. But what I really want to do is start at the beginning. In your amazing book, Grasp, you shared many stories about your younger self. I want to know more about that young boy who was sitting among 70,000 students, waiting for that entrance exam to the Indian Institute of Technology. I can't even imagine what was it like. Can you tell me more about that young boy?
You know, I grew up an only child. I don't have any siblings, and very educated parents, very intellectual. I was a very rambunctious little kid. My teacher used to call me a silky-haired monkey, believe it or not, because I was always bouncing around and so on. Lots of friends. I had a very idyllic childhood and constantly sort of challenged in a good way by surrounded with both love and intelligent conversation. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that I always was very much in the present, and that was a great defense mechanism for me. It came naturally, except perhaps sometimes when I was studying, But when I was in the exam, I was just in the exam. I didn't prepare that hard for it, but I was in the exam. I'm not very good at remembering things from the past or spending too much time on the future. I've spent all my life literally moved from moment to moment, So it's sort of interesting when I wrote that book, but it's very much for the moment.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But I can see the connection between what you're saying about your surroundings, having the parents, that really encouraged education, that context kind of you live in, and also those traits from within. Living the present moment is great, but I really think you're bringing more to that moment than just living that present moment in so many ways. So let's go back to the open learning. You were heading that center for nearly a decade? I think I read somewhere you were the first director. So many creative ideas, so many initiatives and programs that came out. And I think the very, very, very obvious value of all that would be also during the COVID days, heading that online kind of disruption all over the world. So what made you decide to resign last year?
It was a great run, and I was enjoying myself a lot, but I also felt that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to take on new challenges. I've always been research professor. New research topics were interesting to me. I was getting involved with some virtual reality stuff, some AI stuff. That amazing student just defended actually earlier this summer. I had another student who had just defended, and we were getting into transportation, automation, all the sensor stuff. I don't enjoy the trappings of the office. I enjoy the office. I felt I should go back into my regular professor's office and enjoy that for some time. It was sort of surprising. People said, oh, interesting. A lot of people said, why are you doing it? And I had no doubt in my mind. My mind was made up. Even for a moment, I regretted it.
I feel with you because it's just a coincidence that last year I decided to resign from, but I resigned because of different reasons, probably maybe organizational rules, bureaucracy that I felt a little bit constraining to maybe challenging myself more, having that playground to be creative more and so on. But I really feel you. But I think also deciding to leave something that you have built for so long, you have created so much of your name, your identity, and all that. Leaving that behind really takes a lot of courage, right? Especially if you're heading to the unknown in so many ways. And I think having that courage is one of the traits, Sanjay, that I see all through those lines that we were talking about in so many ways. And I'll keep going back and forth with these lines because it's very interesting to see how these traits play in our milestones in our lives. And this is where I feel always that, after a while, you start connecting the dots, you're starting seeing things that every step takes you to the next step and the next step and the next step. And it's just a wow, oh moment for me sometimes. And I've seen that through tracking your milestones in so many ways. So that brings me to talking about a very interesting thing, which is the identity, especially in the academia. The identity in terms of there's a lot of distance, I feel sometimes, between academics and practitioners. I think you have kind of broke that because you started as a practitioner. This is where I feel still the distance is, especially in our education system. In terms of, are we really prepared or are we really preparing our students nowadays for the lifelong challenges that is waiting ahead for them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe a lot in authenticity. You got to be who you are. If one is trying to be what someone is not, you're always an act. And at some point, you're going to forget to act. You get out of character and the whole act falls apart, right? So for me, as an engineer, it's easier, I will say. I came from engineering practice. So when I became an engineering grad student and professor, it was all about doing engineering that was useful in practice. So I always lived that, with my hand sort of stuck through the mirror, to the other side. So that just was very natural to me. And I like going back and forth in that, looking at the other side. I like going through the looking glass and looking back. So I've had the privilege. I know it's harder in some fields. For example, let's say you study French history, right? It's a beautiful topic. You read about the great philosophers, Rousseau and others, and Descartes. How do you make a connection to the practical? And academia doesn't make it easy. So I think academia needs to be addressed because you're judged on how esoteric your papers are, But yet, in fact, the lessons even from Descartes and Rousseau or engineering lessons are useful to students and should be. But I fear that academia has structurally divorced itself, partially, sort of had a separation, from that responsibility. And the social contract of academia has baked that in. So it's going to be difficult, but I think we have to fix it because the world is moving to an era when everyone has to learn every moment going forward. And if academia does not step in to fill that void, someone else will. And that'll be worse for all concerned.
And do you think we have a start there, at least now? When you say you're looking at separations now and how do we bridge those gaps, are we only rethinking? Are we only writing about it, talking about it? What about the actions? What is there right now, Sanjay? You heading now the business school. What is the start of all this, at least in action? What are the differences that we see in programs now that is different than, let's say, even 3 years ago, pre-COVID?
The world has changed a lot in COVID, as we all know. But there's a tectonic change in the demographics of work, the way younger people look at work, the gig economy, all these things. Academia has only tiptoed in that direction, but it now must now take a giant stride. Open learning, which I did at MIT and other people have done, was a step in that direction. But towards the tail end of my tenure at MIT, I developed a thesis with a bunch of colleagues called Agile Continuous Education, ACE. My argument is that education is the oxygen of the new economy. It's not something you take a sabbatical from work to do. It's more like a gym membership. You go there 3 times a week. You don't take a year off, And if it is like the oxygen or if it's like the gym and you have to consume it all the time, how does higher ed transform itself? This is what MIT worked on and continues to work on, and this is what we are taking the Asia School of Business towards. There is a term for it, by the way. It's not used much. We talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary education. I call it quaternary education. We need to make quaternary education a reality. There have been some efforts to do so. Singapore gives its citizens essentially coupons to go take courses and upskill. But we have to make this not an exception, but a routine.
Why is it hard? Is it the bureaucracy of education? Why is it so slow to change?
Structures are hard to change. Schools are hard to change. Hospitals are hard to change. President Obama tried to change healthcare in America. Militaries are hard to change. Things are hard to change. Systems preserve themselves. And academia, because all the contracts and the incentives are set up one way.
And I think the one way that it was set is more like suited to the industrial age, right? It's like a cookie cutter. We want the standardized tests, the standardized people, because we were preparing the students in a way to just have certain skills that they can apply in certain jobs. We were looking at the human being as part of this machine system, right? Don't you think that is why it's so hard? Because maybe we need to start with that part, with that human, with that even outlook. How do we think of the human being?
Look, I think that if you look at the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, in my view, ended with interchangeable parts. It actually started in the armaments industry. Eli Whitney is falsely credited with inventing interchangeable parts. Actually, the French military that did it, which is, it didn't matter where you bought the ordnance from. It would fit in the barrel of the gun. So interchangeable parts. The second Industrial Revolution, in my view, was about interchangeable people. It was about making people interchangeable because people had to work in a machine called a company. And Ronald Coase, the Nobel laureate, explains why companies were formed. It was because you needed to pool resources, like a typist pool or a factory. You needed it all to be together. We are in a third age now. In this third age, you have the gig economy. You have the company of one person. The one person has to be the CEO, the chief marketing officer, the chief strategy officer of themselves. And suddenly, all the things that would have been troublesome if you were a mere cog in the machine, such as creativity, become survival skills. So much of our education system has been created with that in mind, which is to create cogs in the machine. And here I am in the developing world, and it's clear to me this is why it works the way it does here, which is that the colonies needed clerks. You needed cogs in the machine. So now we have to switch the education system to serve critical thinking, to serve creativity and other things. And that's just not what we get to do. And adult education, my God, we weren't supposed to do that. We were supposed to get input feedstock, which was age 17 or 18, not, a 37-year-old or a 52-year-old with different skill sets. We weren't designed for that.
Yes. I feel you so much because I'm in that situation. I feel that I have entered an unknown territory, but I'm learning so much. I'm excited about learning. And that's, I think, a trait I took also all through my life. But part of that, I think what you're saying is, where do we start? For me, thinking about all this, I'm an educator at heart. I love teaching. I love learning. But what I'm finding right now is what's missing is taking charge of our own education as adults. Why? Because the old system doesn't work anymore for us, but we're not there yet in terms of where we should be. So what we do in between, that's where I think I felt knowledge mindfulness can come in play. That how do we take charge? How are we going to be responsible for our own continuing education? Because as you said, it's more like a gym. It is not something, oh, you know what? I really earned my PhD. I'm a full professor and that's it. I can sleep it over. We can't do that anymore. And this is what I really felt. But I felt that, okay, for a long time, education kind of made the distance more between our heads and our hearts. I feel entering the new age of AI, we need to lessen that distance, not only between our head and heart. I just feel that we need to build bridges between our head, heart, and soul. Why? Because that's the only thing that distinguishes us as human beings in the digital era. That's what I feel so passionate about. And I want to dig deeper into this evolution with you. But we have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my talk with Dr. Sanjay Sarma, the MIT professor and the Dean of Asia School of Business, Sanjay shares his valuable insights about the future of education and learning and the importance of continuously evolving one's knowledge.
What we are trying to do is create really thoughtful business leaders who can transform, but also be very principled about it. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is we're also giving them some core strengths so they can be the generalist, but also through our ternary education offering, Agile Continuous Education, they can specialize throughout their lives.
You have been listening to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Maroof. If you want to join the movement of knowledge mindfulness and shape the world of tomorrow, go to drlailamaroof.com. The Knowledge Mindfulness Porch is a production of Forbes Books.